For 5 years, I worked overtime every single day, helping my husband build our company from nothing. The night it finally exploded with success, he cheated on me, took control of everything, and threw me out of our own home. But he had no idea. My late father had seen through him long before I ever did. Before he died, he didn't leave me a savings account. He left me a hidden weapon. By the way, before we dive into how I used it to destroy my cheating husband's empire, tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to like and subscribe so I can keep bringing you stories like this. The clock on the wall at Bright Rise Manufacturing read 11 p.m. Every desk was dark except Nina's, still glowing under a harsh white lamp, surrounded by stacks of reports and a cold cup of instant coffee. 5 years earlier, she and her husband Zach had started Bright Rise in a borrowed garage. Now it filled 3 floors of a modern building in the business district. Zach was the charming visionary, the one who could sell anything to anyone. Nina was the backbone, the one who actually made those dreams stand up straight. In the early years, while Zach focused on strategy, Nina worked 3 jobs. By day, she was a full-time admin at another firm. Every paycheck went to Bright Rise's operating costs. In the late afternoons, she rushed home, not to rest, but to tutor high school kids in math, so she could afford a used car for Zach to visit clients. At night, after Zach fell asleep, she sat at a battered old laptop, running a tiny online clothing store, saving every spare dollar as an emergency fund for the company. She skipped new clothes, skipped meals at the end of each month, and even postponed having a baby, all for their dream. Whenever exhaustion closed in, Zach would hug her and murmur, "Just be patient, babe. When we make it, you'll be a queen. You'll never have to work again. Just enjoy the money." Nina believed him. And finally, it looked like that future had arrived. That afternoon, Bright Rise had secured a massive contract with a multinational corporation. The profits expected next month were higher than their last 3 years combined. That same night was also their 5th wedding anniversary. They should have been celebrating, but Zach said he had to travel out of town for a critical meeting with a new client. Nina, as always, understood. Still, she decided the victory deserved a surprise. She left the office early for once, ignoring the unfinished reports. On the way home, she stopped by their favorite bakery and bought a small chocolate cake with icing that said, "Happy 5 years, Bright Rise, our success." Pulling into the driveway of the house they'd bought 2 years earlier, a symbol of their first big win, also registered under the company's name on Zach's advice, she smiled. Then she frowned. Zach's car was already in the garage. He'd told her he was out of town. Maybe his trip had been canceled. Maybe the surprise would be even sweeter. The house was dark and quiet when she stepped inside. No TV, no music, only the soft hum of the fridge. She set her bag down in the kitchen, then froze by the stairs. The light was on in their bedroom, and above her she heard laughter. Zach's laughter, low and easy. Then a woman's giggle, annoyingly familiar. Lauren, his new assistant who'd started 3 months earlier. Nina's heart hammered. She forced herself to think logically. Maybe they were working late. Maybe there were urgent documents. She climbed the stairs slowly, each step heavier than the last, and stopped outside the half-open door. From the crack came the sharp scent of Lauren's expensive perfume, the one that always filled the office before she even walked in. Nina heard Lauren's syrupy voice. "You're amazing, Zach. You finally landed that huge contract." Zach answered with a smug laugh. "Of course. I'm just tired of pretending around Nina. She works like a mule. Look at her, always in the same cheap clothes, same little headscarf. She really thinks this company could exist without me." Nina's chest clenched so hard she could barely breathe. Lauren purred, "So when are you divorcing her? I can't wait to be the lady of this house." Zach replied, "Soon. She's so stupid. She's the one who saved every penny so we could enjoy this. We just have to wait for the right moment." The cake box trembled in Nina's hands. With the last of her strength, she shoved the door open. Zach and Lauren spun around in a tangle of sheets, eyes wide. Lauren shrieked and yanked the blanket up, but Nina barely registered their nakedness. She saw only Zach's face, the man she'd bled for, staring at her with irritation instead of guilt. The cake slipped from her fingers, splattering across the cold bedroom floor. Silence pressed against her ears, broken only by her ragged breathing. Zach was the first to speak, not with an apology, but with a sigh of annoyance. "Why are you home? Weren't you supposed to be working late?" "Working late?" Nina's voice shook. "I've worked late every day for 5 years, Zach, so you could bring another woman into our bed. Into the house I helped pay for. She moved toward Lauren, hand raised, but Zach grabbed her arm brutally. Pain shot through her shoulder as he snarled, "Don't touch her. I'm done with you." The man who once held her when she cried now looked at her like trash. "What did I do wrong?" she whispered. Zach released her and walked calmly to the desk in the corner. He opened a drawer, pulled out a folder, and tossed it onto the bed. "We're getting divorced. Papers are ready. Just sign." Nina shook her head, tears spilling. "No. Bright Rise is ours. We built it together." Zach laughed, a sound colder than the rain starting outside. "Our company? Are you sure?" He pulled out another document, the company's founding papers, then a second sheet. "Take a good look. That's your signature." Her vision blurred as she read, a share transfer agreement signed by her 3 years earlier, giving all her shares to Zach. "You signed it the night we were rushing to file taxes," he said lazily. "You were exhausted like always. You never read a thing. You just trusted me." Her stomach dropped. He had planned this for years. "So Bright Rise is 100% yours," she whispered. "Exactly," he said. "And this house? Bought under the company, remember? My accountant says it's smarter that way. So this is my house too, not yours. Now get out." Lauren, wrapped in a robe, sauntered closer with a smirk. "You heard him. Grab your little bag and get out. Beggars don't live here." Nina searched Zach's face for even a flicker of mercy, but found nothing. "It's midnight," she choked. "Where am I supposed to go?" He shrugged, marched her downstairs, and shoved her through the front door with no shoes, wearing only the office clothes from that morning. The porch light snapped off as the door clapped shut behind her, and rain crashed down like the sky itself was mocking her. Nina collapsed on the wet concrete of the porch of the house she had once called her dream. Everything was gone in a few hours. Her marriage, her company, her home. Her parents were dead, and every bit of savings she'd ever had was in a joint account Zach now controlled. After what felt like an eternity of sobbing in the storm, she forced herself up. Soaked, shivering, and barefoot, she grabbed her work bag from where Lauren had thrown it and staggered into the empty street. She walked until she found a lonely bus shelter, metal bench slick with rain. She sat there, numb, with nothing but the ache in her chest. With shaking hands, she rummaged through her bag, hoping for something, anything. Her wallet held only an ID and a few crumpled small bills, not nearly enough for a cheap room. Digging deeper into a compartment she rarely used, her fingers brushed something stiff and familiar, a small faded blue bank book. Her breath caught. It was the savings account her father had opened in her name when she was a child. She remembered him pressing it into her hands 10 years earlier, already sick. "This is yours," he'd said. "I put a little in. Don't touch it unless you're truly desperate. Think of it as my lucky charm for you." She'd barely checked it since then. Back then, the last balance she saw was only a few $1,000s. Tonight, even that amount would mean food and a bed. Nina clutched the little book to her chest like a life raft. "Tomorrow," she whispered to herself in the dark shelter, rain drumming on the metal roof. "Tomorrow I go to the bank. I'll empty it. I'll figure it out." Huddled in her damp clothes, she finally drifted into a cramped, dreamless sleep, the bank book pressed against her heart. Sunlight stung her eyes when she woke, still sitting upright on the cold bench. Her body ached as if she'd been hit by a truck. Her clothes were stiff with dried rain. Her headscarf was a mess. Her bare feet were sore and filthy. Hunger twisted her stomach. She hadn't eaten since noon the previous day, but worse than hunger was the memory of Zach's bored expression as he destroyed her life. Nina tucked the bank book into her bag and forced herself to stand. The branch she remembered was about 2 miles away, a short drive in better days. Now she walked it barefoot, every step over gravel and hot pavement a reminder of how far she had fallen. Commuters in suits and heels stared. Some looked pitying, others disgusted. She kept her head down, burning with shame. At the glass doors of the bank, a security guard eyed her suspiciously but said nothing. Inside, the air conditioning made her shiver. Everyone looked polished and clean. She felt like a stain on the marble floor. Nina headed straight to the restroom, washed her face, smoothed her scarf, and rinsed as much dirt as she could from her feet in the sink, ignoring the strange looks. When she finally took a waiting ticket and sat down, her hands wouldn't stop trembling. What if the account was closed? What if the money had been eaten by fees? When her number was called to window 3, she walked up like she was walking toward a verdict. The teller, a middle-aged man with glasses and a warm smile, glanced at her name on his screen. "Good morning, Ms. Ward. How can I help you?" Nina's voice came out hoarse. "I'd like to take out whatever is left in my savings account, please. All of it." She slid the faded blue book and her ID under the glass. The teller, his nameplate said Henry, frowned thoughtfully at the worn cover, then typed in the account number. His forehead creased. He checked again, more slowly. Then his eyes widened. Without answering her question, he picked up the phone and spoke quietly, asking someone to come to window 3 to assist with a priority client. Nina's panic flared. Priority? A well-dressed man in a suit hurried over from an office inside. Branch manager Carter, according to his badge. He leaned down as Henry turned the monitor toward him. The manager's eyes went wide, then softened as he looked at Nina. "Ms. Ward?" he asked in a careful, almost reverent tone. "Yes," she said, her throat tightening. "Would you mind coming with me to my office? There's nothing wrong," he added quickly, seeing the fear on her face. "We just need to discuss this account in private." Every customer in the lobby watched as the barefoot woman in wrinkled clothes was escorted past the velvet ropes into a plush office with leather chairs and the smell of coffee. "Please sit," Mr. Carter said, pouring her a glass of water. "First of all, I'm very sorry for any shock this may cause. Your account is special." Nina clutched the glass. "I just need to know if my money is still there. It was about $10,000, I think." Henry, now holding a tablet, swallowed. "Ms. Ward, you're not looking at 10,000. He turned the screen so she could see the long string of numbers and the currency sign. "This is a trust account your late father set up. It currently holds $10,200,450, and that's not counting other assets tied to it." The room spun. Nina stared at the digits, unable to process them. "No," she whispered. "My father was just a mid-level manager at a state company. He could barely afford our mortgage. There must be some mistake." Mr. Carter shook his head gently. "Your father appeared modest, but according to our records, he also controlled significant investments through accounts overseas. After his death, per his instructions, everything was liquidated and folded into this trust in your name. For the last 10 years, our wealth management division has been growing it. We were also instructed not to contact you until you came here yourself, or until a certain trigger date. You came first." Henry tapped a few more times and pulled up another file. "There's something else. 2 years ago, a separate instruction went into effect. The trust began aggressively acquiring shares in a private logistics company, Starline Logistics. It's the only authorized importer and distributor in the country for the key raw materials used by a manufacturing firm called Brightrise." Nina felt every muscle in her body lock. "Brightrise," she repeated. "My company." Mr. Carter nodded. "Over the last 2 years, the trust has quietly bought out minority shareholders whenever possible. As of yesterday's closing, you own 60% of Starline Logistics, Ms. Ward. You're the majority shareholder of your former supplier." Nina sat in stunned silence. Rich, suddenly, impossibly rich, but also the owner of a company that held Brightrise's throat in its hand. "Why?" she murmured. "Why would my father do all this?" In answer, Mr. Carter opened a drawer and set a small velvet box on the desk. Inside was a heavy brass key. "There's a safe deposit box linked to your trust," he explained. "Our instructions were to give you this key the moment you appeared to access the account. We don't know what's inside. Only you are authorized." Minutes later, guided by Carter and Henry through chilled, silent corridors, Nina stood in a private booth in front of a metal box marked with her number. A vault attendant slid the box onto the table and left them alone. Nina inserted her brass key. The bank used its own master key. The lock clicked open. Inside, there was no cash, no jewels, only an old passport with her father's face and visas from countries she never knew he'd visited, and a thick sealed envelope with 4 words on the front. "To my daughter, Nina." It was his handwriting. Her hands shook as she broke the seal and unfolded the first page. "Nina, my dear girl," the letter began. "If you're reading this, 2 things are true. I've been gone for some time, and you're in the kind of trouble I feared would one day find you." As she read, tears blurred the words. Her father admitted he'd lied his whole life. He wasn't just a simple mid-level manager. Before she was born, he'd inherited a small European investment firm and grown it quietly. He had more than enough to live like a king, but chose not to. "I wanted you to grow up knowing the value of work, not thinking the world owed you anything," he wrote. "Forgive me for making you live simply when I could have given you more. It was selfish, but I wanted you strong." Then he wrote about the day she brought Zach home and how he recognized the last name immediately. Zach's father had once been his business partner, a greedy man who'd betrayed him in a major deal. "When I met your Zach," the letter said, "I saw the same hunger in his eyes that I once saw in his father's. Not the hunger to build something together, but to consume. If I had forbidden the marriage, I knew you would only run toward him harder. So instead, I stayed quiet and began planning." He wrote that he'd used his connections to buy a small, obscure distributor and transform it into Starline Logistics, the exclusive license holder for the specialized raw material Brightrise would one day depend on. He ordered Starline to give Brightrise impossibly low prices once the company launched, making Zach feel like a genius while hiding the real cost as a growing receivable. "2 years ago," the letter continued, "I instructed the bank to start putting most of your trust into Starline itself. I expected that by then your husband would feel untouchable, that the company would be soaring, and that his true nature would surface. When he finally decided you were disposable, I knew I couldn't stop the pain, but I could make sure you were never truly powerless. Brightrise is the body, Starline is the heart, and now the heart belongs to you. Use what I've left you: money, ownership, information. Take back what's yours. Make him answer for every tear. I'm not there to stand beside you, but I've placed a sword in your hand. Fight, my daughter. I have always been proud of you." By the time she finished, Nina's tears had dried. What filled her now wasn't helpless grief, but a cold, steady flame. Zach had thrown her into the street with nothing. Her father had secretly placed an arsenal at her feet. She carefully folded the letter, slipped it and the passport back into the box, and closed it. When she stepped out of the vault room, Mr. Carter and Henry looked at her anxiously. The fragile, barefoot, broken woman from the lobby was gone. "Mr. Carter," Nina said, her voice calm and level, "I need several things. First, a new personal account and a premium debit card. Wire $100,000 from the trust into it immediately. Second, I want an urgent meeting with the best corporate law firm your bank works with, today. Third, I need full copies of every contract between Starline Logistics and Brightrise Manufacturing, on my desk before lunch." Carter blinked, then nodded rapidly. "Of course, Ms. Ward, we'll make it happen." Nina glanced at her stained blouse and muddy feet and added, "And one more thing. Please book me a suite at the best hotel within walking distance and send someone from your client concierge team to arrange clothes and a stylist. I have a very important meeting to attend in a week, and I can't go looking like this." That afternoon, she checked into a luxury hotel under her own name for the first time in her life. By evening, she'd showered, slept for a few hours, and sat with a team of lawyers going over contracts late into the night. For a week, while Zach and Lauren celebrated her disappearance, she studied, planned, and sharpened the sword her father had left her. 7 days later, Zach sat at the head of Brightrise's boardroom table, radiating triumph. Beside him, Lauren wore a bright red dress and played with an expensive pen. The senior managers looked uneasy. They all knew Nina had been the engine behind the company, but Zach owned 100% on paper. He cleared his throat. "Thank you for coming on short notice," he said. "As some of you may have heard, my marriage to Nina has ended. She won't be returning to this company. To move forward, I'm convening this emergency meeting to formalize new leadership. Today, we'll be appointing a new chief financial officer." He turned toward Lauren with a self-satisfied smile. The heavy wooden door swung open before he could say her name. 2 men in tailored suits stepped in first, faces unreadable, followed by the crisp clicking of heels on marble. When Nina walked in behind them, the room collectively gasped. Gone was the tired woman in cheap office wear and a sagging scarf. She wore an ivory pantsuit that fit like it was made for her and a deep emerald silk blouse, her headscarf wrapped neatly and elegantly around her face. Her makeup was soft but flawless, highlighting eyes that were no longer gentle, but razor-sharp. She moved with the easy confidence of someone who had nothing to prove. "Good morning, Zach," she said, her voice echoing in the stunned silence. "Hope I'm not interrupting your little celebration." Zach shot to his feet. "How did you get past security?" he barked. "You have no right to be here. This is my company, my building, my house, and you're nothing now." Lauren curled her lip. Wow, new clothes, new attitude. Who's paying for that, Nina? Got yourself a rich old sugar daddy. Nina didn't even glance at her. She focused on Zach. You're right about one thing, she said. Legally, Bright Rise belongs to you. I checked the paperwork. Very clever. But there's a problem with your empire. She walked slowly along the side of the table, her lawyers, Mr. Donovan and his colleague, setting a thick stack of documents in front of Zach. A factory, no matter how shiny, dies without raw materials. Zach's face paled. What are you talking about? He snapped. Nina leaned forward slightly. Over the past week, I've learned that Bright Rise relies on exactly one supplier for its key imported components. A company called Starline Logistics. They give you miraculous prices, don't they? Prices so low, they made your profits explode, so you could buy designer suits and sports cars. One of her lawyers flipped open a folder and spoke in a flat, precise tone. As of last week, our client, Ms. Nina Ward, owns 60% of Starline Logistics. She is now the majority shareholder and effectively controls your only legal supplier. The room erupted in anxious whispers. That's impossible, Zach muttered. I would have heard. Nina straightened. You didn't because you never bothered to look beyond your own nose. There's more. Starline's board met 3 days ago. They've decided to exercise a clause in your contract, page 20 if you've ever actually read it. It allows them to suspend deliveries and renegotiate prices and terms if there is a change in ownership on either side that materially affects risk. Starline has changed ownership, and you, Zach, just kicked out the very person their previous owner designed this relationship around. Donovan slid another document toward him. Effective immediately, he said. All shipments to Bright Rise are frozen pending resolution of outstanding obligations. Bright Rise's head of production, Daniel, blanched. We can't run the lines without those materials, he stammered. We'd have to redesign the entire process. New machines, new certifications. That's a year of downtime at least. Zach clung to the only argument left. We've always paid on time, he said. We don't owe Starline anything. Donovan gave a thin smile and opened a fresh folder. You've been paying 10% of the actual price, he explained. For 2 years, Starline has effectively given you a 90% discount, documenting the difference as a trade receivable. A silent loan, if you will, meant to fuel your growth. That loan has reached approximately $3.5 million with interest, and per the same contract clause, that entire balance became immediately due the moment ownership at Starline changed hands, which means you owe my client's company $3.5 million today. The color drained from Zach's face. He knew exactly how much cash he didn't have. Lavish trips, a luxury apartment for Lauren, continuous upgrades to his own lifestyle. He'd spent the company's apparent profits as fast as they'd appeared. Nina let the panic settle in the room, then spoke softly, her voice cutting through the chaos. So here are your options, Zach. Option 1. You wire $3.5 million to Starline Logistics right now, in full. You keep Bright Rise and we walk away. Zach's jaw clenched. You know I don't have that, he hissed. Then there's option 2, she continued, sliding one last document across the table. You sign this agreement transferring 100% of your Bright Rise shares to me via Starline in exchange for extinguishing the entire debt. You walk out of here with nothing, exactly how you shoved me out of that house. You're blackmailing me, Zach snapped, looking around as if someone might save him. I'll find another supplier. I'll sue you. This is illegal. Donovan calmly tapped the contract. You can certainly try, but the licensing agreement for your critical material gives Starline exclusive rights nationwide. No one else can import it legally, and given your current balance sheet, he glanced at the finance director who looked ready to faint. No bank will finance the kind of retooling you'd need. You built your castle on someone else's land, Mr. Collins. That land now belongs to our client. The managers shifted uneasily. They could see the entire company hanging over a cliff. After a long, agonizing pause, Zach grabbed a pen with a shaking hand. He stared at Nina, searching her face for the love that had once been there. All he found was ice. If I sign this, you'll ruin me, he whispered. Nina's gaze didn't waver. You already ruined yourself the night you threw me into the street. This is just the bill coming due. In front of his senior staff and Nina's lawyers, Zach scrawled his signature on the share transfer agreement. Within minutes, Donovan's team began the legal process. On paper, Bright Rise was now owned entirely by Nina's holding company through Starline. Zach slumped in his chair, hollow-eyed. Lauren clutched his arm, but Nina wasn't finished. She nodded toward the door. Bring them in. 3 forensic auditors entered with laptops and boxes of files, eyes sharp and professional. "First order of business under the new owner," Nina announced to the room, "is a full forensic audit of every major expenditure from the last 2 years, especially those authorized by Mr. Collins and Miss Lauren." Lauren went white. Zach lurched to his feet. "You can't do that," he shouted. "This is harassment." Nina raised an eyebrow. "Actually, as the sole owner, I can. I want everyone here to see exactly what kind of leaders they had." Security guards moved closer to Zach and Lauren, quietly taking their phones and keeping them seated as the auditors connected their computers to the projector. For the next 4 hours, the boardroom felt less like a meeting and more like a slow public execution. One by one, the auditors pulled up transactions. A $150,000 sports car, bought 3 days after Nina was kicked out, paid for from the company's operating account, but registered in Lauren's name. Business trips to Bali, Singapore, and Hong Kong that included 2 first-class tickets every time, Zach and Lauren, while no clients were ever contacted. A $50,000 home renovation, billed as office interior improvements, but the address was Zach's private house. Then came the shell company, Lauren Bright Consulting, supposedly hired for branding work. Over $200,000 had flowed into that account in 6 months. The auditors had already confirmed it had no staff, no real office, and no measurable output. It was just a pipe for stealing. By the time the last slide appeared, the managers were staring at Zach and Lauren with open disgust. Their outrage gave Nina the final push she needed. She pulled out her phone, walked a few steps away, and dialed the number of the financial crimes unit she and her lawyers had prepared. "Good afternoon," she said clearly, glancing back at the 2 pale faces. "I'd like to report a case of corporate embezzlement and fraud at Bright Rise Manufacturing. The primary suspects are present and we have all the documentation ready." Lauren broke down, sobbing. "Nina, please, I'll give it back. All of it. Just don't call the police. I'm begging you." Zach tried to bolt for the door, but the guards restrained him easily. And Nina remembered pounding on the front door of their house in the rain, begging to be let back in. She remembered Zach turning off the lights and walking away. Now she met his terrified eyes without a flicker of sympathy. "You should have thought about consequences before you treated me like garbage," she said quietly. Within half an hour, officers arrived, read them their rights, and placed them in handcuffs in front of the very staff they'd been flaunting their wealth to. As they were led past her, Lauren screamed and blamed Zach. Zach said nothing. He just stared at Nina, realizing that the mule he'd underestimated had just taken everything from him with a single relentless move. The trial months later drew reporters from every business and crime outlet in the city. The prosecution laid out the case in meticulous detail: the forged consultancy, the personal luxuries charged to the company, the falsified expense reports. Lauren, desperate to save herself, agreed to cooperate and testified that the fake invoices had been Zach's idea, that he'd promised to divorce Nina and marry her, that she had been foolish and greedy enough to believe him. Zach's public defender tried to spin everything as a messy private feud, claiming Nina had orchestrated a financial trap as revenge for a failed marriage. But the judge saw it differently. "A corporation is not your piggy bank," he said sternly. "Even a majority shareholder can't simply steal from it." When Nina took the stand, she didn't cry or rage. She spoke as a professional. She described how she'd built Bright Rise's systems from the ground up, then been locked out when Zach took all control over the main accounts. She admitted freely that they had divorced and that he'd betrayed her, but politely reminded the court that her personal heartbreak was separate from the missing $3 million in company funds. "If someone steals your wallet," she said in response to one of the defense lawyer's jabs, "you report the theft. It doesn't matter whether you once loved that person, it matters that they stole." Her calm, precise answers dismantled the defense's narrative more effectively than any angry speech ever could. After a long day of testimony, the judge retired to deliberate. When he returned, the courtroom held its breath. Having considered the evidence and the admissions of Ms. Lauren Hayes and the demonstrable pattern of concealment on the part of Mr. Zach Collins, he announced, "This court finds both defendants guilty of embezzlement and money laundering." Lauren burst into loud sobs. Zach stared straight ahead, face gray. "Mr. Collins is sentenced to 15 years in prison and ordered to repay the misappropriated funds. Ms. Hayes is sentenced to 10 years and jointly liable for restitution." The gavel came down with a crack. As guards moved in to lead them away, Lauren shrieked and blamed Zach for everything. Zach didn't respond. He simply glanced once at Nina. For the first time, there was no arrogance in his eyes, only fear and regret. Nina watched them go, not with satisfaction, but with a deep, settled sense that a chapter had finally closed. She didn't stay for the reporters' questions. She stepped out into the daylight, feeling lighter than she had in years. A year later, the old Bright Rise building had changed as dramatically as its owner. The huge logo on the front now read Adrian Group, named in honor of her father, Adrian Ward. Inside, the gloomy gray walls Zach had chosen were replaced with warm white and glass, sunlight streaming into open spaces. The ostentatious black marble reception desk Lauren had ordered with company funds was gone, replaced by a green wall of plants and comfortable seating for visitors. Nina walked through the lobby in a simple cream blazer and softly patterned silk scarf, greeted by employees who smiled not out of fear, but respect. Her first major decision as owner had been to raise wages for the operational staff and long-serving managers like Daniel by 30%. Her second was to open an on-site daycare center for employees' children on the ground floor. She still worked hard, but she no longer believed in killing herself for someone else's ego. She believed in building a place where hard work actually mattered. The culture shifted. The sycophants who had thrived under Zach drifted away, replaced by people more interested in results than flattery. In her office, once Zach's domain, everything felt different. The oversized leather throne chair and imposing desk were gone, donated to charity. In their place stood a clean, modern workspace and a single framed photo on the shelf, her father, laughing at something behind the camera. On her desk lay the latest production report. Daniel came in, grinning. "Quarterly numbers are in," he said. "We beat our targets by 20%. The new machinery from Germany is paying off and Starline's supply line is rock solid. No more magical discounts, but very healthy margins." Nina smiled. "Tell the team I'm proud of them, and remind them bonuses go out next week." Daniel nodded, eyes shining. "You didn't just save this company, Nina. You saved all of us." Later that day, Nina stood at the head of a long conference table facing executives from both Adrian Group and Starline Logistics. "For the last year," she began, "we've rebuilt after a disaster. Adrian Group is healthier than ever. Starline is stronger than ever. But my father didn't create this structure so that the heart and the body would beat separately forever." She paused, meeting each set of eyes. "Today, we complete what he started. I'm announcing a full merger of Adrian Group and Starline Logistics into a single integrated company, Adrian Group Holdings. From raw materials to finished product, we'll control our own destiny." The room erupted in applause. It was more than a business move. It was the final piece of her father's hidden plan sliding into place. That evening, as the sun bled orange and pink across the city skyline, Nina packed her laptop into her bag. She no longer stayed until midnight every night. She trusted her team. She trusted herself. Standing at the window, she thought back to the girl who had once stared out at this city from the same height, exhausted, believing she had no choice but to keep sacrificing herself for a man who saw her as a workhorse. That girl had been thrown into the rain with nothing but a faded blue bank book. The woman at the window now owned the building, the supply chain, and the story. She picked up the photo of her father and held it for a moment. "I didn't just take it back, Dad," she murmured. "I grew it 10 times. We did it." Carefully setting the frame down, she switched off the light and stepped out of her office. The lobby buzzed with the sound of employees heading home on time to their families. As Nina walked out through the glass doors of Adrian Group, the night air felt nothing like the cold rain of that awful night. She wasn't a discarded wife or a desperate woman at a bus stop anymore. She was a CEO, a survivor, and the wielder of the sword her father had left her. If you've made it this far, tell me in the comments what you would have done in Nina's place. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story with someone who needs to be reminded that even from rock bottom, you can rise higher than ever.